So I'm holding myself accountable to dealing with things that have happened to me that were big moments, almost like alterations of myself over the years. We talked about how identity and confidence in your beliefs and what that can mean for you if you have a strong belief in something and it gets shook, and then it causes you to then take your life into your own hands. And what does that look like? For me, I've been going through this story in my head when I identified, like, oh, here's where the shook part came. It's been kind of a weird situation. I don't like being uncomfortable. Weird. But it does seem like it might be important. So in getting past that, I'm like, who do I tell this story to? How do I like adapt in this situation? How do I acknowledge that these are areas that I then took a hold of myself, and then watched my life fall apart ultimately? I think it's important that we acknowledge the dark places we've been in, so that we can know what we're capable of and be confident in the identity that we are seeking. So I'm going to tell you a really horrific story that shook my life and ultimately ended my marriage. It took me that route. It took me into witchcraft. It took me into some of the darker places that proved that my fears were substantial and that the alternative lifestyle that was being sold to me was a lie. In 2014, I had gotten meningitis when we were not living yet in Eastern Africa, but had been going back and forth because of our adopted children and for humanitarian reasons. Meningitis took a grand toll on my body, my memory, my nervous system, my physical system. It was incredibly difficult after having 4 biological children. Waking up to realizing we also had put in so much time and effort into adopting children internationally. So we then moved our entire family across the world, because the children that we were adopting were part of a trafficking sequence of events. So we wanted to make sure that their investigations were done properly. So that's where a bunch of the issues start. So I had gained a lot of confidence in that I had this identity in Christ and that I was able to do all things through him. And in a lot of ways, I believe that is true, and it's still true today. But back then, I put a lot of trust in the church. I put a lot of trust in people who were within the church or within humanitarian religious organizations, that they had your best interests at heart for you and your family and for the children that you were also adopting, biological children, families, whatever. Alternatively, I had seen that that's not true, okay? Like, I won't, you believe it going in, and then you're like, wait a second, something's wrong here. But you form this connection and this network of people that you trust. And within this network of connection of people you trust, you find out that some people are not who they say they are. Ultimately, when they do that, it can shatter your life. So the story is within that. I've done a lot of soul searching, and after waking up out of a long, terrifying, witchcraft-infested lifestyle, I have been able to identify my Jordan rivers that I have had to cross in order to gain confidence in my identity of Christ. So the one that shook me the worst was in 2015. We had moved over there, our entire family. I had helped an organization with an investigation on a United States organization that was coming over to start up a foster care system in one of the poorest areas of Eastern Congo, which in fact they were not starting a foster care system. They were looking for loopholes in the adoption system to be able to get kids out during a shutdown and then on. So it was a system of betrayal that was happening at that time. So here we go. The organization that I was doing the investigation under was one with a driver that I had known for over a year at that point. He was trusted, he was reliable, he could find you the mango juice if you couldn't find the mango juice. This guy was on it. So in this traveling back to the airport, he was not understanding, apparently, that I was going to go and see a friend at another organization in ministry that was in Rwanda. So we went from Congo to Rwanda. It's a good 4-hour drive in a Jeep with the Christian services that were going back to the States. So we get back to the airport when the driver says, "You're coming with me. You're not going there." And I said, "Absolutely not." I jumped on a moto and went all the way up the hills to my friend's house. During this time, I spent the night. We're going to go and reunite with this man in the morning to drive back to Congo. So during this time, I didn't think much of it. I told the story to my girlfriend there and said it was really weird. He chased me around the car. I went and I got on a moto. He told me I was coming with him. Obviously wasn't coming with him. Sent a message to the boss and was like, "Hey, in the morning, I don't know where to go to meet him so I can get, our ride back to Congo." So when the morning came, that's when I dealt with it. Got to the humanitarian headquarters and ended up getting inside the car with this man who had then started telling me almost instantly that he had spent the night with a bunch of prostitutes. I had, in that moment, text the boss and said, "I'm super uncomfortable. I'm not really sure what to do." But taking that ride anyway was something that I chose to do, thinking that I was untouchable and that I was safe because people knew where I was. That is a mistake. So we began our descent into the hills of Rwanda. And he begins talking about how he's going to rape me and my children and the nannies of the house. He is taking great pride in the fact that he gets many prostitutes and that I missed out on a hell of a night. And we're going in and out of service. I am squishing myself up against the door listening to him as he's throwing his arms and yelling. It was one of the single more terrifying moments in my life. This is why I know it's one of the more life-altering moments, is because I can literally see it sequence by sequence. So what happens next is truly soul-shaking, and I hope I do not destroy anybody's... I hope I don't destroy anybody with this story. Just know. So, up ahead in the road, we've probably been driving over an hour, and up ahead in the road is a woman in her getenge and her dress laying over the threshold of the road into the road where we are currently driving. I start yelling, "Stop the car. You're not slowing down." I'm grabbing at the wheel here and there, like in this moment, and he is yelling at me to get off, and he will do what he wants, and he does not care, and that I deserve whatever's about to happen. He runs over a woman who is dead in the road. And the jolt of the vehicle was enough. It felt like punishment for all of the things I've ever... This one's hard. It was terrifying. I had worked in this country and region already, and I've seen death, and I've tried to prevent it, and I have helped people get resources, but at this moment in time, this was a true predator driving this car. And I could not believe that he did not pull over. I cannot believe he did not swerve. Not even moments after that, he starts yelling about something stuck to his shoe. Pulls over the car and sits there and picks the gum off the bottom of his shoe. He hit a woman, but wouldn't stop, but pulls over for gum. That's ultimately one of the sickest things I have ever witnessed in my real life, with my own eyes, with my own ears. But not only that, is that we start driving again and I start yelling. I'm thinking like, I'm a bad girl. Like, I'm mad. I've got a voice. Like, the Spirit of God is in me, righteous anger, that I'm just like, what the hell do you think that like, you think you can keep your job? You think you can keep your family? You think, like, I'm thinking like, people like this deserve nothing. You know what I mean? When then he elbows me. And the next thing I know is I'm waking up at the border with myself disheveled. The rain is coming down, and I am not sure where I am entirely. So, hard. That was the first time I had been, let's say, physically defiled, on top of it all. There have been times when I felt like my safety was questioned, like things got scary, you know, but never had I been like fully and completely like feeling a little bit like I just became part of the statistic in the place that I was trying to help the statistic of violence against women not be. So we get to the border, it's raining. Tells me to stay in the car, get back in the car after I've checked through the border. I just took off, went home. He did not catch me. I got there and I told on him from what I could muster. So I told some of it, enough to get him fired. And I implied a lot of things. I did say a lot about the sexual things that he had said. I didn't so much bring in some things because of the shame that I had. Felt like I was part of his, hitting someone. Some of the things that he said. This man had the audacity to email my husband at the time to ask him for work, even though these are the things that he had said to me and had done to me. And to me, I did not feel as though God had his hand on my life at that moment. So, he was fired, cut from that. We then started working on some family unification stuff with the girls in the program. Went out to go and get the family members of a girl that was staying with us because her family was not from inside of the town that we were in. Went out to this village where armed militia came into our motel. They had put my room on the main floor with doors that would not lock, and there was blood on the curtains, and put all of the other investigators and program developers in a different part of the motel away from me. So I had asked if they could move my room. They said no. I asked if somebody would be willing to fix the door. They said no. And ultimately that led me to asking through Google Translate, fantastically enough, if the guy who came with us for security would then sleep in my room. This was me taking my security under my own wing, like under my own provision, which then led to a snowball effect of decisions based on what I thought was best for me and my family. And you can ask anybody. It didn't lead to fantastic things. It led to the destruction of the family union. It led to more deception, brokenness. It was a facade. I was not safe, and I wasn't making anything better by doing these things, stepping out of the will of God. Flash forward, I thought that it was working. We tried to restore, we tried to revive, we tried to redefine what God was in our lives after all of this brokenness. I literally was led down a path that was a joke. It said, empower yourself. Empower yourself through what? Empower yourself through affirmations and mantras and no. I am sure that by stepping out of the will of God, I was led down a path that ultimately showed me every dark corner of this world, which is why I am so confident in teaching body boundaries and consent right now. See, before I would meet with parents and I started developing these programs and identity, and when Hope and Light Initiative was an organization that was assisting in Eastern Africa, hundreds of girls in these programs. It was amazing. The second I stepped out and did not trust God anymore was the second that it absolutely spiraled in every way. But that is why I'd love to tell my story more, my stories of acknowledging the dark places I've been, because when it comes to seeing these things firsthand that are now plaguing our country, our children in their ideology of gender and the normalization of sexualization and pedophilia, it's a real thing. It is daunting to have worked so closely to organizations that have had people, religious organizations and NGOs that say, I took this job so I could have access to children. Why would you share that? But that's what happens in my life, is that I access this area of life because I stepped out of the will of God. I literally existed among people that were full of guilt and shame like I was. We existed in the same environment. And it's bad what people turn to when they are trying to identify with something and they don't have healthy boundaries and they don't have healthy coping mechanisms. It's lucky that I did and I do, and I've been taught so much through this. One of my least favorite, most recent, is a teacher in a beauty school that was practicing his grooming techniques on young girls within the school. Touching, scaring, gets into teaching about skin conditions and is touching himself through his pants. He is also sharing that his boyfriend of 6 years ago was having problems with pimples. When he ends up pulling this kid up, he's 19. Keeping in mind this guy who's sharing's in his 40s. 6 years ago, how old was he? So we just do the math. So I'm saying they exist amongst us, and we do need to prepare our kids to be dealing with such threats because they are real. So in my quest to teach this, this is why I take it seriously. So I got a lot of people on my stuff saying, like, what are your top three books? Top 3 books: Child Lures, ABCs of Body Safety and Consent, and Let's Talk About Body Boundaries, Consent, and Respect. These are 3 books that are absolutely necessary in your arsenal to teach your kids. It goes through the lures, it goes through the boundaries, it goes through the respect. And I can honestly say that I am so thankful, because even though and I have so many stories, you guys, it's just disgusting. Stepping out of the will of God, but still knowing that He's got you, is absolutely absurd, because I'm a lucky one. I'm a lucky freaking person. I am so lucky. So I've defeated for myself a really big boundary tonight. I literally was like, I can never share this story fully. I could never do it. And after getting all these messages and stuff at like, hey, my kid's dealing with this or that, and I'm just like, these threats are real. I've survived so many of them. And for what? For why? For who? Like, seriously. I think about these things, and a lot of times I'm disabled by them. I'm just like, I'm not a functioning adult is what I want to be, like, is what I want to say. And then I'm like, wait, I'm here. Like, I'm validated. I'm teaching this stuff to my kids, and they're smart. So I've got to be doing something right? So it was really cool because in church this morning, he's talking about just like the calls on your life and like the promises that God has given you. And for me, years and years ago, I had this vision of the dead literally coming to life. And I was like, dang, that would be so cool to see. I want to see that. And then I'm going through these moments where God kept me safe. And like there was no other explanation behind, like in my own power. No way. But I was somebody who was dead. Like, I was somebody who was practicing darkness, and he legitimately revived me and woke me up. And I believe in his promises because I've seen them, and I believe in restoration like that. So I'm gonna share shit. Yeah, I said a bad word. Thank you for listening. If you were here with me, that was quite possibly the hardest sharing I have that I have done in quite a long time. I do love talking with people one-on-one, but in order to fully wake up to what God has for my life, I do feel like that is a necessary step for me to take. Is he brings the dead to life, and I can tell you what, the darker areas of my life were scary and terrifying, and I'm glad to be awake.